You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
Our next guest, really happy to introduce you to him. We're probably all familiar with the story of Jesus' birth, aren't we? We've got Mary and Joseph, we've got the donkey, no room at the inn, Jesus lying in a manger, and there were visits from shepherds and wise men as well. Ta-da! For children, there is much more to know, I'm sure. Well, Martin Starkey, a former primary deputy head, believes that there is so much more to think about, and he's produced a book and resource called God Called Me, the Nativity from different perspectives, and he's here to talk to us now. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Craig.
So we're in London. You've come from
Wigan.
Oh, thank you so much to come down. That's a long journey. I'm guessing your train was around about 6 o'clock.
It was, yes.
That's splendid.
Very cold.
So I have to ask you first, what does the Nativity mean to you?
The Nativity is something I think that nearly every child in British schools will grow up with in some form or another. I know there's a lot of argument now about moving away from that, having Elvis and things like that, instead of the traditional Nativity. But everybody knows the story more or less, I think, because they've grown up with it through primary school and what they've seen. And if they've grown up to have children themselves, their own children performing in nativities as well later on in life. So to me, it's something that whilst I was teaching, it was something that we obviously covered. I worked in many church schools particularly, and I often found that children had misconceptions, as did staff, as did many parents, about some of the more intricate details of what happened where, in terms of coming from a scriptural point of view. I had no real concept of the link between the Old Testament and the New and the prophecies that foretold Jesus being born. And then I started getting children to try and write to show empathy with different characters as a writing exercise initially, and then I thought, right, I need to explain this a little bit more, because they would always assume, for example, that kings were present at the same time as everybody else, the shepherds. The traditional nativity scene that you'd see in school or on a Christmas card.
When in fact it was actually quite a few months afterwards, wasn't it?
Certainly. Yeah. So, they would say, is that really? they were amazed by that. So I thought, it kind of grew within me to begin to formulate an explanation, and then I had the opportunity to begin to start writing probably a couple of years back. We tested it in a church situation as a performance. I thought there's something to this based on how it went down. And the book was written and finished this year.
Amazing. So, school children up and down the country, including mine, actually. Little 4-year-old Lily was the Angel Gabriel this week. They've been reenacting the Nativity this month. But you feel that parents, teachers, they really are missing things, aren't they?
I think they are. I think they're certainly missing the vast amount of evidence that, whether you're a believer or not, that was written in the Old Testament foretelling when Jesus was going to be born, and everything that that pointed to that was reiterated in the New Testament, and that the opportunity to kind of show that link, that even from a historical point of view, that God has had his hand in history at that particular time. Really,
I'm interested as well. You say the book shows links between the Old Testament prophecy and what happened at the beginning of the New, and now at the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New, that's probably a good chunk of time, isn't it? It's not just the day after, it's about 400 years, but you also look at the historical, geographical evidence that touches on political situation at the time. You really have covered so much.
Yes,
some might say it's perhaps a bit too much to introduce to children. What would you say to that?
The majority of my experience is in upper key stage 2 anyway, so that's your year 5, year 6. I'm finding that it's moving into year 7 and 8, and even new Christians are kind of taking it as a synopsis of a quick overview of what happened. So it's becoming more widespread than I originally intended it to be. But things like, as you mentioned, the historical point of view, I mean, I wasn't fully aware until I started researching, for example, Herod and his family and his situation, what actually went on. In fact, he had just assumed the throne. He'd taken it by force. The Roman government at the time were happy for him to do so because they were helping him quash certain uprisings. But it should have been his brother. He had an older brother who should have been king on the throne.
So he felt vulnerable anyway.
He did. he was brought up as a Jew, so he knew little bits of what perhaps had been foretold. You know, he would have known the Old Testament. His dad, Antipater, brought him up as a Jew. He picked what he wanted from the religion and left the others. So the Jews weren't particularly happy with him. But because he was a good warrior, Romans were happy to keep him in place. But, for example, when it comes to his first wife and his 2 sons, he killed them. And I don't know why. I haven't got in. I've tried to find out why. But I'm thinking this guy's a little bit unhinged, really.
Yeah.
But, you know, that doesn't come out in the scriptures. You have to go into history to see that, really.
So how does then thinking about the shepherds, the angel Gabriel or Mary help us in our understanding of the story? Why is it important to have a holistic point of view?
I think it's important to see the links between everything. So how God, I was going to say engineer, if that makes sense, in inverted commas,
Sure.
where he, by his providence, allows certain things to happen because we all have free will. And I think that comes through in the book. You know, God called me, but it's up to us whether we choose to follow or not at the end of the day. But God's will be done at the end of the day, whether it's me, you, or somebody else that comes along after, depending on our choices. But things will never thwart God's will. And I think that comes through in terms of how God engineers or by his providence moves things around so that people seem to be in the right place at the right time for things to happen according to his will. And I'm hoping that comes through in the book as well.
Splendid. Well, we can actually hear a bit of the book. I know it seems strange to say that, but we've got some of your children,
yes,
to act out some pieces of the book from different perspectives. So we can hear some audio pieces now. I believe this is a little bit of Mary, and perhaps an idea of how she might have been feeling as what was a young girl at the time, 12 years old, we're thinking, not married. A huge scandal to be pregnant in this day and age. So let's have a think about this. Here is a perspective from Mary.
I took all this incredible news to heart, but had no hesitation in making it clear before the angel left that I would do it, that I was God's servant and would do whatever he called me to, so that what he said would be fulfilled in my life. My first problem that dawned on me was in telling Joseph. We were to be married. How would he take this news of me expecting a baby that wasn't his? My first test in how much I trusted God was right there. It was hard enough for me to believe, and Joseph would only have my word for it being the truth. There was no angel at this time to help break the news.
What I find incredible about the story of Mary as well, so like many examples in the Bible, there were lots of questioning God when plans were revealed to them.
Yeah.
Not the case as far as Mary's concerned at all. Was there, really?
Not really. It was just, whatever your will is, Lord, I'll do it. And it's a good example to the rest of us. I think the amount of times I'm asked to do things and then say, well,
nope.
I want the explanation before I sign up. Really.
And I want the big house, and I want the car before I do it.
Well, maybe not quite that, but certainly some explanation, because we're wired that way, aren't we? We want to be able to justify why we do things or why we don't do certain things, but Mary was just obedient to God, which is a great example. A
little bit longer clip now. This is from the perspective of one of the Roman guards, perhaps someone who we never think about during the Nativity story. So here we go. Who's this voiced by?
This is Alex.
Alex is?
He is 10.
Okay.
He's my son as well.
Okay, here we go.
As they neared the gate where I stood, they looked at me and smiled as they went through, despite how they must have felt after such a tough journey. They stopped, took stock of what was around them, maybe looking at what had changed and what remained the same, and then headed over to the inn. I'd assumed, wrongly, that there was already a place available for them, but the anxious look upon their faces told a different story. The innkeeper, busy making money from a full guest house where food and wine would be needed, longing to the night, didn't even see the desperate need they were in when they had asked for a room. He didn't see what was right before him, with a woman in obviously desperate need, ready to give birth at any time, and so he sent them on their way, saying that there was no room. At that point, something stirred within me. I can't explain what it was, but I knew I had to do something. As Roman guards, we weren't expected or encouraged to get involved with the day-to-day dealings of typical, everyday people. But as this was just a little town of Bethlehem, no one would know if I did get involved and did something to help. It wasn't a matter of me showing favouritism, but just being a responsible Roman guard looking after the citizens who paid their taxes to Caesar, wasn't I? I went over as they began to walk away from the inn and knocked on the door myself. This time a maid answered it, so I asked, or rather demanded, her to get the innkeeper and come to meet me. Whilst he didn't really want to leave his revelling guests, he didn't want any trouble with the authorities that I represented either. I explained the circumstances of the couple he had just turned away, and even though there was no room there or anywhere, it seemed in Bethlehem that night, he agreed they could settle in the stable around the back. The innkeeper instructed a woman to get some blankets, food and water, and show the couple round to the stable. The couple smiled, thanking me and the innkeeper, then followed the maid to where they could, at last, settle, be safe and warm for one night at least. At the time I wasn't sure if I was a believer in God, but when things like this happen, I thought that if there was, He sometimes puts people in a place where they can help others who need it. Bethlehem wasn't a special or important place at the time, but for this couple, it was their home, and they needed me to be there at that time to help them. I wonder if some of my fellow Roman guards would have done the same thing. What we didn't know then was that despite Bethlehem being insignificant, small and lowly in our eyes, God had designed it to be the place of a very significant, large and lofty event in the birth of a king.
Incredible stuff there from the point of view of the Roman guard, something which we just never would consider.
That's right.
Martin.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Why did you feel as if you needed to put that in?
I just wanted to get children and readers to imagine that if they saw Mary and Joseph coming into Bethlehem, what they would see, think, whether they could intervene. I mean, I've used a bit of artistic license there, as you can tell, where the innkeeper turns them away, first of all, because he's busy with everything going on. Yeah. Then the Roman guard goes over and intervenes with his authority to say, look, you need to help these people out. Yeah. It may have happened, it may not have happened, but the idea
we don't know, do we?
It's again about people in the right place at the right time, so it's to try and put that across.
The other story which we could tell, maybe from different people's perspective, which for a creative like you would be Easter time. And I understand that there's a sequel on the way to this?
There is. The idea is that some of these characters will see Jesus grow up and follow him, and see him through to being crucified and through to his resurrection and into Acts. Some won't. There'll be other new characters there, but the idea is, again, to show the continuity and get that story across in a different way for young readers, hopefully.
It's a really accessible book. It's God Called Me, Nativity Stories from a Different Perspective. I can imagine if you've got kids, 7, 8, 9, 10, they'd really get on well with this. Some really cool pictures in there as well. And you're going to leave a few for some prizes?
Yeah, there's 4 there for you to use.
Great. That's really, really cool. But if people just can't wait for prizes, how do they get a hold of it?
It's available on that well-known bookstore online.
The one by the rainforest.
That's
Amazon.
The one. Oh, right, that's the one. Yeah, so you can get it in hard copy version or download straight away. Or they can go to my website and contact me directly. So if it's schools or youth organisations, we can do a deal, really. It's U2Air, YOU2Air.co.uk, and get in touch with me that way.
Excellent. Martin Starkey there, who's the real author of God Called Me, The Nativity from Different Perspectives. Really appreciate you coming in this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's a long, long journey. We appreciate that. And have yourself a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Not one. Martin doing a fantastic job there. Wonderful, wonderful. You just don't think of the different perspectives, do you? We just read the story and that's the story. But actually, there are real human beings involved in that story, and they each would have had their own take on things, their own perspective. Wonderful.
You're listening to Premier Christian Radio.
So we will play out that song that Martin told us about. We had the different perspectives from Mary and the Roman guard. Well, this is a song that goes with that book, and this is called Peace on Earth. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
wise men came traveling to search for a king, looking for the Savior. The King